Over the last few evenings, we've been finding that we've had more questions than we've had time allowable, so we will try and get through, and the panel will be sure to keep their answers short. All attendees will have been sent the event etiquette, reminding them of the needs to be respectful of all speakers and question askers. Now, I'm sure we're not going to have to use this, but if there are anybody who's slightly rough, then we might need to automatically mute somebody, and in the worst case scenario, we will take them outside into a Zoom ante-chamber where the community engagement team will have a quiet word. And so after the event, we'll be emailing all attendees any relevant information that's been discussed and full contact details for the ward councillors in each area. Now, this evening, we have a full panel of ward councillors for you. We have, for St Margarets and North Twickenham, Councillor Jeff Acton, who I understand is experiencing a few tech issues at the moment and will be with you shortly. Councillor Alex Amon and Councillor Ben Koza. And for Twickenham Riverside, we have Councillor James Gard, Councillor Roger Crouch, and then finally Councillor Julia Needham-Watts. Quick rundown of what the agenda will be is going to be the opening introduction, then we'll have councillor updates, a bit about the local area fund, and then a full hour for your questions. So, first and foremost, we'd like to give you some information about what the council has been doing over the last 4 months and how we've been responding to the pressures, for want of a better word, of the COVID or COVID, depending on whether you're northern or southern pandemic. So we have a short video which we'd like to share with you now. So it is time for me to say run VT. Thank you.
The first half of 2020 has been an extraordinary period for all of us. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on all our lives. The council has not been immune. The pandemic has brought huge challenges to us and to the way in which we deliver services to residents. Throughout the whole period, we have been committed to providing key services to all residents and help to those who need it most. As a snapshot of some of the things we achieved in just the first month of lockdown alone, we provided more than 6,000 hours of home care. We provided social care for over 1,600 vulnerable adults. We answered over 2,000 calls to our community hub. We provided 47 rough sleepers with accommodation. We delivered over 500 books directly to residents from our libraries and saw a 365% increase in people using our online library services. We had over 42,000 views of our online sports classes. We collected an estimated 47 tonnes of waste and recycling every day. And we kept our 51 schools open, providing education for over 500 children of key workers and vulnerable families. We know that things haven't always been perfect, and many people have been frustrated by some of the lockdown measures that have been put in place, and the fact that some of our services had to stop to ensure the safety of residents and staff. But we've been committed to prioritising those most in need. During this challenging period, I have been blown away by the continued incredible community spirit that we have seen across the borough. The pandemic has brought out the very best in so many of our residents, with neighbours providing a helping hand, the weekly clap for our carers and frontline workers, residents donating to food banks, and the general willingness of so many to go above and beyond in their support for members of our communities. Following a call for volunteers, Richmond CVS received a staggering 3,000 applications from residents eager to help in any way they could. We have seen groups delivering food parcels, setting up virtual fitness classes, checking up on elderly residents that are shielding, and collecting prescriptions. This generosity from residents and local groups has been genuinely humbling. And as we look to the future and towards recovery, we know that there are still huge challenges ahead. The recovery period provides us with an opportunity to make environmental changes that are needed across the borough, and we have already started implementing some of these. For example, we have already started with our post-COVID-19 highway recovery strategy, looking at how we can ensure social distancing, encourage walking and cycling, and ensure our children can get to school safely. Over the next few weeks and months, we will be looking at other ways we can support local communities. And of course, residents will need to play their part in the future as they have done over the last few months. We've worked hard to ensure that businesses have received the funding they're entitled to, awarding a total of £35.79 million to over 2,100 local businesses. But now as our high streets begin to reopen, we all need to make sure that we support our local shops. Many of our businesses are run by local people, and if we don't use them, we will lose them. As we emerge from this difficult period and look towards recovery, we want residents to come on board and provide us with their thoughts and ideas on how we can create a better borough for all of our residents. This moment provides the Council with an opportunity to reflect and improve the way we work and engage with residents, and your support and ideas are key to that. Thank you for coming this evening, and I look forward to hearing from you all.
Okay, so there you are. Just a brief overview of what we've been doing. I may have to redo that voiceover, I'm afraid, because it's terribly dull. It's very leaden. And if I have one fault, it's that I do tend to gabble. But then when I try to be measured, then I sound as though I'm delivering the address. You know, it's some sort of state affair. Okay, so here we are. The time you've all been waiting for is going to be the time to hear from your councillors. What we're going to be allowing them to do is a short board update as to what they've been up to over the last few months on your behalf. I think I saw Jeff Acton.
Hi.
Hello, Jeff. Would you like to give a quick, we're going to start with some Margarets and North Twickenham. So Jeff, would you like to give us a quick rundown of what you've been doing for the last few months?
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Gareth. Yeah, sorry about the delay getting in. I have some problems locally, but anyway, yes. Good evening, everybody. And yeah, it's been a time for us all. Of course, we've been very busy supporting businesses and the shops and so forth in our ward over the last few months. The council straight away got very speedily onto the government grant schemes to help out with business rates and the small business loans. So we've been busy going around with the businesses and making sure that they were all getting their due money to help them and to keep people employed. So helping people who got staff who were furloughed and so forth, and trying to make sure that they could carry on. And that included businesses in places like Twickenham Studios, as well as shops and that. And recently we've had the discretionary grants as well. So we've been very active with the businesses. On the local side, the local population have been absolutely brilliant in picking up and helping people. The number of volunteers we've had, the actual residents associations like where I am, we've been collecting food for people, going up to the Vineyard Centre and so on. And across the borough, that's been very good. And I would say the same for here. And I've been involved with the Etiquette Centre, which has been collecting and distributing food and groceries and that for all across Twickenham, not just here, everywhere. And it's been marvellous to see the number of residents who've stepped up and helped with that. So between us all, you know, there's been a lot of support for that, for the community. And in particular areas like, again, near where I am, we've been having, we've got everybody is signed up to an email and phone system so they can get help if they need it, and that's been working well as well. We haven't had too many bad problems, but there have been some, and it's been great that they've had a support there. And of course we've had the test centre in the RFU was set up fairly early on, and that's been a help to people who've got symptoms and who could go away and get tested, and that's been quite well used. I know it's been quiet some of the time, but it has been well used. So overall, we think we've responded very well in the ward, and people have stepped up. So we're very pleased with that, Gareth. So
excellent. Thank you very much, Jeff. Over now to Alex Amon.
Thank you very much. Only just got a sort of a few things above and beyond that, which Jeff's already mentioned. I think we have kept in touch with the group of residents that have been leading the initiative to try and bring Moormead Pavilion back into use, and I suspect that may come up tonight. Happy to say more about that. I think we're slightly, concerned that time is moving on, and that we do need to see a resolution to the Moormead Pavilion situation, and so very happy to talk in some more detail about that. But we're staying in touch with the present sort of lead grouping to do that, and have been sort of trying to support and encourage wherever possible. As those of you who are eagle-eyed users of St Margaret's train station will see, many years of campaigning have now finally brought the physical infrastructure of a side gate accessible off of Amiens Park Road. That gate is not presently in use, which is quite frustrating to me as one of the ardent campaigners for it, but is down to a range of things to do with South West Railway in terms of agreeing the exact operational makeup for that gate's use. And it's particularly difficult now to kind of finalise, because resulted in the disruption, as you will all know, to various transport providers, TfL, South West Railway, Network Rail, and others. So we're still on it, but there has been a delay to sort of making that an effective amenity because of, in part at least, COVID. Jeff didn't mention, but I know he's been involved as well in some of the conversations we've had sort of as councillors, but also as senior members of this administration with the RFU and with the Army and Navy organisers about the Army and Navy rugby fixture. And there's been a stream of work where various parties within the sort of firmament of the military have been looking at exactly how that event is delivered. And we've been working with them, sort of holding their feet to the fire to try and make sure that when and if Army and Navy fixtures return to the borough at Twickenham Stadium, that they're going to be run in a much better way, so that people don't face the type of disruption that they have in some of the recent events of that nature. There was also a small matter of the ward boundary review conducted by the Electoral Commission, and I'm pleased to say on behalf of the three of us that we feel that the settlement for St Margaret's and North Twickenham is on the whole a balanced and reasonable one. The original proposals were to take out quite significant amount of the ward, given that we're the largest ward in population terms, but to take out quite a significant portion of population north of the A316 and move it over in political terms to Witton Ward. We and various other residents opposed that change, and instead a relatively small movement of some residents close to and including Twickenham Station will move into our neighbouring ward on this conversation, Twickenham Riverside, at the next local election. So we're very pleased broadly to be representing as many of our residents that we presently do as we can in the next election, should you decide, of course, to return us. And then the only other thing to say was there's a small matter of us having submitted a bid for a bridge which would straddle Ham and Twickenham, but that lands in cases in different wards to St Margaret's and North Twickenham, but very happy to talk some more about that. We implemented a school street in rapid fashion. In fact, one of the first school streets in this borough was in St Stephen's School in St Margaret's and North Twickenham. That was implemented before the close of this this school year. And
okay. I'm going to have to ask you to draw these comments to a close, Councillor.
My last comment, because I'm sure Ben won't have much more to add after my garrulous intervention.
And let's give him the chance to. Ben Koza, would you like to come in now?
All right.
So if somebody could unmute Ben, councillors, please don't press the mute button.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to come in, but I think Jeff and Alex have covered most of what we are doing. Apart from sort of individual casework, which we've been helping people with, one particular planning application in Winchester Road at the end of Drummond Place, with some lovely trees, and that we're supporting the residents with that. And of course, we're doing our normal committee work, holding meetings virtually and getting on with the council work. So I won't take any more of your time, and you can move on to the next one. Thank you.
Bingo. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're moving into Twickenham Riverside. We go straight to Councillor James Park.
Thank you, Gareth. Just to highlight a couple of key things that are going on in Twickenham Riverside ward at the moment, which I'm sure will come up in questions later anyway. Firstly, the development of the Riverside between Water and Wharf Lane, that is going on. You'll recall that there was a consultation last year, a competition between potential architects. A set of architects, Hopkins, were chosen, and we've been working with them to refine the designs, which were generally pretty well received. So we're not planning wholesale changes, but we're working with them to address some points that were raised. There was also a parking and servicing consultation on that recently. Got a very big response to that, and thank you very much to everyone who did respond. The work's currently going on, sifting through those responses and seeing what adjustments need to be made as a result of those. Secondly, there are some distancing measures, some social distancing measures going on in Twickenham Riverside at the moment. You'll have noticed pavement widening in East Twickenham and a one-way system over Richmond Bridge. You'll also have noticed the pedestrianisation of Church Street. On both those things and on other potential measures to improve social distancing locally, we'd be very pleased to get your feedback. These are temporary measures. They can be tweaked and changed in response to comments. We think that they've worked reasonably well and have been reasonably well received, but interested to hear your views on those. And finally, just on the local area fund, we've received a lot of applications from local groups for this new fund which exists to support community projects. And so we're looking forward to receiving more applications from you, more ideas from you from how to improve the community. And there is some money available to do that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now over to Roger Craft, Councillor Craft.
Hello, thank you, and good evening to everyone. I won't repeat some of the issues that I've been involved with James. In East Twickenham, I've been chairing the Lidl Community Liaison Group, which has met virtually and is looking at the opening of the Lidl and the Deer Park School, and involves the residents' associations. Sadly, because of the pandemic, it looks likely that the school won't open until early next year, and I'm waiting for an update on the Lidl. Like James and Julia, I've been supporting residents and the business community through this difficult period, but it's also important to emphasise that some of the normal business of the council has continued. So I sit on the planning committee, so the planning committee has met several times. So it's business as usual there, and I'm helping residents with various planning applications. On the borough level, a particular passion of mine, and I'm pleased that Councillor Roberts appointed me as the borough dementia champion. Obviously that's a very important issue at the moment with, sadly, families not being able to visit their relatives in care homes. And I'm working with Councillor Piers Allen, our Adult Social Services Chair, on developing our dementia strategy, and I'd be very pleased to hear from any resident or anyone involved in the voluntary sector on that particular point. And in a private capacity, I've been helping Hands, Help a Neighbour in Distress, a charity based in Twickenham Riverside ward, who help residents with their shopping at this difficult time. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Roger. Okay, finally, Julia Needham-Watt.
Thank you very much. Well, over the past few months, I've suddenly found myself as being a home teacher, perhaps not a terribly good one. But in between that, as well as the things that the other councillors have mentioned, I just want to talk about our parks and open spaces, which I and I'm sure others have really enjoyed having access to. Marble Hill Park was closed briefly, but we were able to discuss this with English Heritage, and thankfully they reopened the park, and it's been such a blessing to have that open space to enjoy. The downside that we've seen in our parks with the extra use and people eating and drinking outdoors has been a massive increase in the amount of litter. Now, obviously the council doesn't have responsibility for Marble Hill, but it does for many of the other parks. We've worked with our contractor Continental Landscape to increase the number of collections. And you may also have seen that we've got some new bins being trialled along the towpath, which are smart bins, which the idea is they send a message to the collectors when they get full. So this makes the whole collection process more efficient. And we're getting another sort of bin as well to trial and see what is the most effective way to deal with waste and recycling in the streets. The next trial will be with split waste and recycling bins, because we'd really like to capture more of those bottles and cans and things that people have as part of their picnicking. Others have mentioned that the business of council carries on, and when we last sort of reorganised how we do things, my fellow councillors in the Liberal Democrat Party elected me to be the chair of the Environment Committee. And this has involved a lot of work with both planning policy and also the waste and recycling services, which coincided with a new contract, and there have been teething issues which I'm expecting to have at least a few questions on this evening. We're working with the contractor to try and resolve those. It's a lot of hard work. We're really committed to getting that service to a good place so that we can then work with the contractor to work on some of our waste minimisation ambitions, which is part of our climate emergency strategy. And I'm looking forward to working with our communications team on that later on in the year. I'm really keen to hear what your questions are going to be, so I'll leave it there and hand back to Councillor Roberts.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much everybody for those updates. Now, you will have heard talk in those updates regarding the new community fund, which is, I mean, it's as a council, we're used to taking money away, but in a rare fit of, well, I'm not sure, rush of blood to the head possibly, but decided to give some of it back. And it's going to be £10,000 per ward. Now, I appreciate that this isn't apes, peacocks and ivory by any means. However, when you consider that there are 18 wards in the borough, that's £180,000. So what we're going to do now is have a very short film, which is going to be a far better voiceover from Councillor Millard, who's paid to do this sort of thing. And he will tell us all about the new community fund.
A new £180,000 fund has been launched to help support community-led projects in every ward in the borough, helping to rebuild local areas and connect communities after the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The £10,000 pot for each ward is intended to support local initiatives, helping launch new ideas and developing projects to make a positive difference to our borough. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a widespread impact on how we deliver services and support local people. We welcome all ideas on how to improve your local area, particularly those that aim to help rebuild our communities, connecting people and finding new ways of supporting each other. Any individual, local group, charity or business can submit an idea or apply for a grant. Applications need to demonstrate how the project meets one or more of the following priorities. Enable local people to develop, agree and deliver their own responses to local issues and build stronger communities. Make public places more attractive, enjoyable and distinctive. Support local initiatives that address the causes of climate change and minimise the environmental impact of carbon, waste and pollution to protect the future of our borough and our planet. Promote the vitality of our town and neighbourhood centres. Widen participation in sports and physical activity. Enhance the artistic and cultural offer and protect the borough's heritage. Improve health and well-being. Improve crime prevention. Improve community assets. Before you apply, you will need to discuss your idea with your ward councillor to see how it fits with local priorities. You can do this by sharing your idea online or contacting your ward councillors directly. And then, your idea will be reviewed by ward councillors and officers to recommend next steps for your idea. This may include an application to the local area fund, but could also include signposting you to another source of support or funding for your idea. If the idea is suitable for the local area fund, we will invite you to submit a formal application. Once a complete application has been submitted, it will then be reviewed and we'll let you know if it has been successful. We look forward to hearing from you.
So there you go. I told you he was better at that sort of thing than I am. So
terrific guitar work, by the way, Councillor.
Yeah,
Robert.
I mean, yeah, a jaunty backing track makes all the difference. So what's after this meeting, everybody will be sent an information pack, and details of how you can apply to the community fund will be included in that information pack. So time to move to what you've really come here for, which are the questions of your ward councillors. And I see that we have one already in the chat function, and that's Jalal Haji. So if you want to ask a question, remember, just type question in the chat and we will come to you. It's as easy as that. So, Jalal, are you still here?
Can you hear me?
Yes, of course, we can hear you. Far away.
Good evening, all. Thanks for organising this evening and for your time. The question's quite straightforward. I love the idea about Richmond Bridge. I do early morning walks around the borough, about 10 miles a day, and I'm mostly around the river. What I've noticed is obviously noticed a lot of rubbish. Is there going to be any signage improvement to inform people who are picnicking in the evenings to take their rubbish home? I feel sorry for the new contractors, because it's such an increase of workload for all of them. And to police this with your smart bins, it's going to be an impossible task. So are we going to improve? Are we going to have some better signage informing people what they should do with their rubbish? I take it home rather than leave it overflowing bins.
Okay, well, this seems tailor-made for Julia Needham-Watts to come straight in on this one. You've muted yourself, Julia. We can't hear you, Julia. Can we unmute Councillor Needham-Watts, please?
It's all right, I've done it. Sorry about that. I was so enthusiastic to agree with the sentiments expressed by the questioner. It's really important. The primary responsibility for rubbish lies with the person who takes the stuff out there into the environment. And you're right that a bin in itself isn't going to solve the problem. The smart bins are helpful in areas of lower footfall, because they mean the collectors don't have to go out so often to a bin that may or may not be empty or full. And some people have said, well, you must just have more bins, bigger bins. And in some cases, one example would be Twickenham Green, for example, where we have put bigger bins there just for the summer period. But I think generally throughout, we need to get people to take more responsibility. And I'm pleased to say that this is exactly something that our communications team are working on with me and with colleagues, to put a really forceful message in front of people. We've seen some campaigns elsewhere that use words that I would prefer not to say in public, and we won't be swearing at people or using that sort of language, but we're going to try and be as firm with our signage as we possibly can, and I'm looking forward to getting some of that signage out there. Because, you know, we can only do what we can, and you're right, our collectors have worked very hard. Continental Landscapes, you'll see their van going around and they work hard to collect the rubbish, but as soon as they clear it, it's back there again. So we need several prongs to the attack. We need the right sorts of bins in the right place. We need our contractors to do the good job they're doing, and we need people to take responsibility, and part of that is going to be signage.
Okay, thank you. I see Ben Kosa hoping to get in on that point. Okay, please, councillors, stop pressing the mute button. Otherwise, most of the evening will be taken up with me saying, "Can we unmute them?" Right.
I didn't unmute. I didn't mute myself. I was muted. Anyway, you know, totally support what Julia said about signage, and we need a forceful message. But where areas have been identified, like Twickenham Green and in our ward, Moormead Park, they were alerted to you know, a lot of overflowing bins there. So we were able to put a bigger bin there, and since then it's been I've had no further reports. So if there are any localized reports, do let us know.
Excellent. Okay, so unless anybody wants to come in on that one, I'm seeing nobody. We then move on to Rob Force. Is that Rob Bray? Can we unmute Rob, please?
Thank you very much. I wanted to make a comment and then follow up with a question, if that's okay.
Yes.
We've been doing regular weekly surveys of all the parks and open spaces over the last few months, and we've been counting how many people are using them. And typically, we're getting 2 or 3 times as many people using these open spaces as we were pre-lockdown, which for us is wonderful. And as a consequence, there has been an awful lot of more litter, for sure. There's also been an awful lot more people proactively picking up litter, and that's one of the things we're really trying to support, is that kind of pro-social behaviour of people picking up litter. And the Parks Department and the contractors have been brilliant, I have to say. They've been really terrific. So we're really pleased with how many people are using the new spaces. We counted 1,700 people going through Twickenham Rough, which is a newly opened space only 2 years ago. Which brings me to my question. Last time we met with the station development contractors, they said that there was a hope that they might be able to open the new space that would link the station with Moormead Park along the river before the end of the year. I think they said September, October time this year. It's gone very quiet on that front, and I just wondered if anybody does know what the latest story is on that, because I think to be able to open up a new open space and to be able to link those spaces together along the river would be a great sort of asset.
Excellent. Okay, so who would like to tackle this one? Who's been in contact with the developers regarding Twickenham Station? Jeff Acton.
Yeah. Well, Rob and I have attended some of the DMG meetings recently, and he's right, it's gone very quiet there because we were pushing to get the completion of that path. And walking past there, you see there has been some work done on it, Rob, but I think they were talking about next spring now, but I don't know. I don't have that confirmed. And we are planning to have another meeting, another DMG meeting. And I noticed they're working on the place now. So hopefully we'll get some news on that. But I will try and ask them again with Solom and see if we can get a proper date, because it would be very well used and it's a very popular thing that is going to happen. As you say, the usage of Moormead Park in our bit has been hugely increased, and I would agree with your figures. I don't know the multiples, but it's certainly a lot more people, and therefore that path is going to be really important. So I will get on to them, and we will see if we can get a date for you.
Excellent. Would anybody else like to come in?
I think the only thing I'd say, Councillor Roberts, is just, I mean, Councillor Acton has been very even-handed there, but I think, you know, dates have been somewhat movable regarding that station, so some of the development associated with it may also be a little bit movable too.
Yeah, I was going to say it's terribly on brand for for the Rough to be delayed in reopening. Now, does that help you there, Rob? Is that giving you the answer you require?
No, that's good. I think we need to keep on sort of
pressing them. Yeah.
Okay, folks. I see people. Where I'm Mr. Perry. We're coming to you next. Please don't wave, because I don't have everybody on the screen. There's about 50 of you. So, Mr. Perry, you say you've got 3 questions. You can have one, and then if we've got time, we'll come back for the other 2. So choose your best one, please. If we can unmute Mr. Perry. There we go.
Okay, the first one is that I would like the borough to appoint a food champion for young people, children and adolescents, to help with this obesity problem, which is going to have a severe effect on the future mental and physical health of our children.
Okay, that's right. So who would like to take up this subject here? I know that some of you have been spending some time over at Etna and regarding their junk food project, but this is more due to young people. So anybody got...
Well, can I just say one thing?
Yes, of course.
Gareth, that's relevant to it, which just say, I mean, we'll take that away and certainly have a discussion about that. I mean, champions are valuable in some instances, but I think, you know, we shouldn't necessarily ascribe some talking head that relates to it. Are you trying to deal with various of the issues that afflict obesity, you know, or whether it's through the transport channels? All I can say as the lead member on transport is the speed at which we're implementing change in relation to improvements to cycle and walking infrastructure is unprecedented, and that people do have appealing alternatives to car use, particularly as public transport. I appreciate that, but I think that my observation would be
You're Your internet's really playing up here, Alex.
Seeing the level of council.
No. Yeah, we'll
with all due respect, he's not really answering my question.
No.
Okay.
But anyway, Councillor Needham-Watts would like to have a go, and then Councillor Crouch.
Yeah, it's an observation. Sorry,
Alex,
Alex,
you're doing a Norman. It's like a Norman Collier tribute act, one for the teenagers. Julia.
Is it possible to mute Alex, please? I can't hear you.
Just keep talking, Julia.
Okay, I'm going to talk over him. Wouldn't be the first time. So I think it's something that we need to work through the schools with. Schools do take seriously the role that nutrition plays in life. It does go along with transport, as Alex I think is trying to say, and taking active travel options as a youngster rather than being taken everywhere in a car, which ties in with some of the other things we're trying to do with an active travel strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But I very much think it's something that where schools will play a leading role, and I wouldn't want us to go in and tell people what they can and can't eat, but we do all need to be aware of it. Although Richmond has a relatively low rate compared to other areas. I mean, there's also some things that we try and do through the planning system, where adverts and certain types of development aren't allowed in proximity to schools. So it's something we're aware of, and we will discuss amongst ourselves more, because I think it's an interesting topic.
Okay, thank you. And Roger, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, the pandemic has obviously reminded everyone that public health, actually, responsibility rests with local government, and tackling obesity amongst our population is part of our public health strategy, working in tandem with the NHS and other providers. As Julia says, we have a low rates, but we should be mindful that obesity affects health later in life, both diabetes and in my area of interest in dementia, there may well be a link with that. So it is an important consideration.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christopher, Ben.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm on the Education and Children's Services Committee, and I'll have a word with and see if we can look at it.
Excellent, thank you for that. Christopher, I promise you that if we get the opportunity, we will come back for your next two questions, okay? Right, so the next question we have is Daniel Zilio.
Hi there, thanks for organizing this event. It's a
hey,
great
Daniel.
day, everybody. A really simple question. The government is trying to get people to take alternative measures to get around, and that includes obviously cycling. I was wondering if any more cycling lanes are being added, and in particular on Richmond Road, which has a lot of cyclists that go to and fro to Marble Hill Park, especially the weekends. And yeah, I was just wondering if more cycling lanes are being added.
Okay, we're hoping that the satellite is passing over Alex's house at the moment, and we're just about to unmute him.
I'm now on mobile telephony, so I hope that I can be heard.
You can.
Okay, so it ties actually with the point I was making, so thank you for the question, which is, so in specific reference to your question, Richmond Road did form part of our initial bids to Department for Transport and Transport for London for funds. Just very, very briefly, we were funded per annum to undertake all sorts of infrastructure change, about £1.55 million from Transport for London. That funding has been cut. There's no prospect of that coming back in the immediate future. And so the only way that we can deliver schemes now is by winning funds from these very quickly put together bid pots of money for Transport for London and DFT. And we bid for a range of schemes across the borough. Within those schemes that we put forward was Richmond Road for cycling improvements. That was not funded in the initial tranche of allocations by TfL or the DFT. So we do not have the funds to go ahead with that specific scheme. It has been resubmitted to the latest available tranche of funding. And I hope very much that it may yet come into play. Just to say in broader terms, and I could go on long about this, but I won't, there are 3 cycle corridors that were initially funded by those bid allocations, and they were a very, very lengthy stretch of Kew Road, which some of you will be familiar with the changes we made there to the parking restrictions. That will be made semi-permanent with engineering measures in early August. And 2 other corridors were identified and funded, and initial design work is nearly now complete for Castle Now and Hampton Court Road. We hope to receive further funding, but those were the 3 schemes at the moment that have received funding. We cannot receive funding for anything other than a scheme which really fundamentally alters the balance of the road, and that at a minimum provides a light level of physical segregation between motorised vehicles and cyclists. So we can't just slap down, nor would I want to, frankly, white paint. It needs to provide a much more sophisticated level of protection for cyclists.
Okay, does anybody else want to come in on this question about cycling and active travel, we should say? Okay, there you go. So Daniel, I hope that answers your question. We're going to move now to Penny Baketing. We're just about to unmute you, Penny, so stand by. There we go.
Okay, thank you very much. Mine isn't so much a question, or it's really a build on the statement or the comment that you made earlier about the Real Junk Food Project. And I'd just like to take the opportunity, and I hope you don't mind, with this community to, if people don't know about our project, that we run the Junk Food Project on a Monday and Wednesday at the Etiquette Centre. And we're taking food from the local community, from the Tesco's, the Waitroses, and we're making soup and fresh food, and also any other surplus food is available for people to take home. It's a really good project, and we only reopened last week, and it's been really encouraging to see so many children and their parents coming. I think that's a really good community project for food to help people eat healthily. And I'd welcome anyone on the call to come and join us. And also that the Etiquette Centre, for people who don't know, has had significant renovation programme, and we have an absolutely fabulous outside seating area, and it really is a good community space that I think everyone in the community should be using and introducing themselves to. So thank you.
Absolutely, Penny. Thank you very much for that. Roger, are you wanting to come in on that?
Yeah, that was a brilliant statement from Penny. Councillor Chard and Councillor Acton, and I think Councillor Palesci from Witton Ward were there on Monday, enjoying the food and
indeed
seeing the wonderful terrace and new kitchen. So yes, I agree that everyone should go along and check it out, and it's a great service. And we as councillors, when normality returns, we have our monthly ward surgery at Etna.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good, good. Anybody else wanted to come in on this? Okay, so we move now. I have a question here which is written, but it gives so much more drama. Cow, it says here, K-A-O. If you'd like to ask your question yourself, it brings it to life somewhat, rather than me in leaden tones enunciating it to the audience. So, Cow, are you there?
Hi, yes, my question relates to Wharf Lane and the forced left-hand turn when you come out of it. At the moment, there's no automatic right to be able to turn into the main road anyway. So you have to often wait quite a long time before somebody lets you out, which means that so either the road itself backs up, or when people do come out, they then have to somewhere else end up doing a U-turn if they want to go towards Richmond. So my question was, in relation to the proposed embankment project and Church Street as it's currently closed, and the potential that that's going to stay the way it is there has there been any thought to allowing a right-hand and left-hand turn at the top of Wharf Lane, which would allow a drastic cut to emissions with people not idling for quite as long, and obviously people not having to do U-turns round either of the corners as soon as they do get onto the main street?
I mean, can I just say one thing from a transport perspective before I let the ward councillors opine. I'll leave it open to them to sort of say how they feel about that. But I think in transport terms, that's something I'll take away and discuss with officers. I think my initial observations are, and they may not necessarily be the right ones once I've had more further conversations, but are that in order to do that, I think you would need to have some kind of signalized junction there, and that strikes me as immensely costly and complicated. And given the volumes of traffic that actually both do and would come through there being so light, I'm not sure it would be wholly justified. But let's hear what the ward councillors think.
Okay, James Charles.
Yeah, I think there are two aspects to that. First of all, there's a short-term aspect, because there's an increased sort of desire to turn right out of Wharf Lane as a result of the temporary pedestrianisation of Church Street, or temporary at the moment. Whether that's taken forward a bit more permanently is a different matter. So there's that sort of short-term measure, which might be quite difficult because of the need for signalling and so on, which is likely to happen. Then there's a longer-term issue, which is to do with the traffic flows around the Riverside area generally, which will change as a result of the development taking place between Water and Wharf Lane. So it is being considered as part of that, but it's not necessarily the case that traffic volumes will be the same there in future, and there could be quite a few changes in that area. So we'll certainly take it away and think about it, but those are just my initial thoughts on the short-term and long-term aspects of it.
Okay. Yes, of course, come on back.
Sorry, if I can just ask, my understanding was that there would still remain access to Water Lane to get down to the river. So I suppose the question is, if people want to go to, the core question is, what do people do if they want to go towards Richmond? Which relates to what you were saying about, you know, the traffic and the volume of traffic.
I mean, you're quite right that it is more difficult to exit in the direction of Richmond. The question is sort of the balance between making it easier to exit towards Richmond and potentially affecting the safety and speed of flows, or the rate of flow along King Street itself. So yeah, I agree with the sort of fundamental point that it would be useful to have a right turn out of there to make it easier to get to Richmond and less need to go around the houses to do it. But there are some issues to be considered about how that impacts on flows on King Street itself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Right, so we have a question. Lindsay Roberts Warren wants to ask a question about the station redevelopment and fire safety.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
In the light of the sort of rather disturbing continuing evidence that's been given to the Grenfell inquiry about who took responsibility for cladding, I wondered if anyone knows what the relationship between, which appears to be a method that's been used in the construction of the residential part of the station redevelopment. They appear to be buildings that are cladded. Does anyone know who is responsible for ensuring that whatever the developer has chosen actually really does meet the standards? I just thought about, you know, quite often about how disastrous it would be, not only for individual people who might be at risk of losing their lives, but actually on the whole community if something like that happened. And I wondered very much, you know, who is able to sort of keep an eye on what's going on, because it's clear from Grenfell that things that were in the plans, and then there was a substitution for a different kind of cladding and so on. And I have no idea who's responsible for that, but I just wondered if anybody can tell me.
Okay, Ben, was that you with your hand up to come in? Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be normally be the council's building control department who would oversee the construction and look at all the safety situations and the safety requirements. So it would be the council's building control department who would be overseeing that. I think the developer also has, you know, an option to have a private inspector, and I'm not sure if they've done that, but if they did, then they would be doing the same role as the council's building control would. So I think you can take comfort from the fact that it will be overseen by a body, whether it's the council or an independent contractor, and the rules will be followed.
Lindsay, are you a Richmond, I was doing Richmond one of these last night. Are you a Twickenham Riverside or a St Margaret's and North Twickenham resident?
Well, I'm Twickenham, North Twickenham, I guess, but live very near the station.
Okay.
And, I mean, I didn't feel as though I was at personal risk, but it did seem to me that the evidence that was given to the inquiry, particularly lately, just after it reopened, showed fire safety officers just ignoring it and saying, oh no, it doesn't need to be checked, or whatever. And in the light of that, it just seemed to me that maybe it behoves the community to be super vigilant and maybe not to assume that the sort of normal safety measures will be adequate. I think that was what concerned me, because, to be honest, some of the evidence seems to show an extraordinarily cavalier attitude on professional people who you would assume were there to sort of protect, people from the disaster that happened at Grenfell.
Oh, Julia.
Sorry, to butt in there, that to a degree there's an element of national legislation and guidelines that we work within, but I recall being told that there were no buildings in the borough that were of the same nature as Grenfell. We certainly, the development is not as high as that, but I understand the point you're making is one of reassurance. And when the development was given approval, there would have been conditions which set out how it must go ahead, what materials would be used. And that is something that development management, I think that's what Ben was referring to, development management are responsible for following that up and looking into that if concerns are raised with them that perhaps conditions haven't been followed. But I don't think that's what we're saying. We're not suspecting that they've done the wrong thing. We're just seeking reassurance that it's safer.
What I think might be useful is it's quite a technical issue which you raised about whether it's the right sort of cladding, the right sort of insulation, is you will have registered, Lindsay, for the conversation. So what we will ask the ward councillors to do is to ask some questions of officers and email you more of a full answer. Would that be helpful?
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, so that would be Ben Koza.
Yeah, just to say that the developer would be required to send in plans as to what, how they're going to develop it and what materials they are going to use. So, there is a process which will happen, and the building control department will ensure that the development is according to requirements. But as you suggested, we can get further details and get back to Lindsay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will move now on to the next question. Sorry, people are starting to do long comments, and this makes it really difficult for people to be able to get a question asked. So can we have a question? The next one, I can see you waving, Mr. Berry. It's not your turn yet. Bilal Haji is next, and then you will be, I will come back to you, Mr. Perry.
Thank you. My question is again regarding signage again. It's more to do with the narrow bridges, the pedestrian bridges over the railway tracks in St Margaret's and the railway tracks, the bridge that connects Cole Park Road to St Mary's School, because those bridges are quite narrow. There's no signage informing people about social distancing, and they should be, it'd be quite helpful to have some mirrors there as well, because you've got to be very careful. Is the council planning to improve the signage? You've done some steps around Richmond Station, Richmond Bridge. Are there going to be more signage regarding social distancing in those narrow spaces?
Okay, Alex Amon,
yeah, I'll come on to that. So I think Richmond Bridge was a sort of specific trial and had specific characteristics, because it is one of fairly few crossings of the river, and because of its very high footfall and because of the narrowness of the pavements, I think it was justified for a trial. I think, you know, we haven't gone on to that in this conversation so far, but there's mixed compliance with that signage anyway, which is, I think, an important thing to recognise. So, you know, putting up signage doesn't make it that people actually necessarily observe it. In relation to the bridges that you mentioned, look, I use them a lot myself. I only live very close to those bridges myself, and they are narrow. And I think the view that we've taken as a council is that erecting signage at every gin or alleyway, crossing, narrow point would just be an infinitesimal, you know, an infinite task. And it would never please everyone. And to get some of it and not the rest would also dissatisfy many people. It's not without cost. And as I say, I think the compliance levels associated with it wouldn't really justify it. Of course, the stipulations regarding space have changed from 2 meters to 1 meter plus as well. So I think the general view that we've taken is that residents as individuals are intelligent, multifaceted human beings who know that the crossings that they're using or the alleyways that they could be using have risks associated with them. And they have to make a determination whether they want to take, in the case of the example you gave, Jalal, the Cole Park Road bridge across to Mary's Terrace. You could walk across the frontage of Twickenham Station to get to the same location. And so you make a judgment as a human being whether you want to entertain the risk of a potential pedestrian conflict in that confined space or not.
My concern is that bridge is quite popular when the schools are back in September with children from Orleans Park, St Mary's School, because I know my children used that when they went to those schools. So I'm just thinking that we're just preparing for the next outbreak and making sure that we're ready for that as well.
We'll keep it under review, Jalal, but what we have to remember as well is that outdoors, the risk of contracting the virus
it's less. I know it's a lot less, but as the weather gets colder, therefore it's more chance it may spread. That's what they're kind of.
We'll keep it under observation, but those are the drawbacks, I'd say.
I'm saying you've got this limited budget and many requirements. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Perry, your patience has been rewarded. Now, you've got 2 questions there.
Yeah.
One about a designated gym for rehabilitation of COVID sufferers, or Richmond Park close to traffic. I would urge you to go for the Richmond Park close to traffic because you're more likely to get a full answer on that.
Okay, I'll go for that. Yeah. I don't see why cyclists are being privileged, and as specialist in mental health for the last 50 years, I think depriving the elderly, the disabled, young families, children, and people from driving around Richmond Park and using its car parks and walking freely through it is actually a serious attack on people's well-being.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to take up Richmond Park closer to traffic? We've been hearing a lot from Alex, and I know that he could answer it.
Well, I mean, unless others want to grasp the nettle, I can't.
We'll take you, and then James can pop in.
All right. So I think, look, I hear the point, and there are a range of views. The first thing to say is that we as the council don't control Richmond Park. That's the Royal Parks. And so, you know, we can make our view known on behalf of the borough. But my view was actually, I have to say, we were much more agitated by the fact that the park denied the access to cyclists initially, because it caused a cascade effect of meaning that anyone wanting that form of recreation was on our parks and our tow paths, and making them more congested and therefore higher risk for those that were using them. In terms of car use, I think, you know, there are different arguments. We've said that we will monitor any changes on our road network as a result of any changes that Richmond Park make, and indeed Bushy Park make, because our main concern, I think, as a borough, on behalf of everybody, is not an ideological one. That's for Royal Parks to kind of determine how they would like their park to function, but it's whether the absence of those routes through the park cause particular transport issues for some of our residents in other places. Basically, you end up with, I'm sure you will end up with some traffic evaporation, but you'll end up with the residual traffic moving to other routes. And if that causes unintended consequences for our road network and roads where residents live, then clearly we will have to take some action on that, or advise that we don't think that those measures are sustainable. But I don't think we come at it particularly ideologically. The parks, the Royal Parks to manage, and if they want to improve that environment for their users, they're entitled to do that. But we will be monitoring very, very warily what the impacts are on our residents, and if they're not sustainable, we'll be saying so. Or if changes need to be made, then we'll be arguing for those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, James, did you want to say something, or were you just
well, I'll avoid repetition, but
yeah.
As Alex has said, the parks are managed by Royal Parks, and I think we did have some concerns, particularly early in the lockdown, that they were overly keen to close those parks, both to cycling and pedestrians and all sorts of people, and that created additional pressure in other areas. Now, their justification was to avoid overcrowding and congestion in Richmond Park, but of course, as soon as you close a facility, it doesn't prevent the congestion, it shifts it to somewhere else. And we've been mindful, I think, as a council, to try to keep as much as we can open in terms of our parks and facilities, to allow people space in an area which is lucky to have green space, but which is still a crowded city area.
But it's the most treasured place by so many people.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's disappointing that they chose to restrict access generally.
Yeah,
you're
so
in close agreement
do something
with Sir
about
David
it.
Attenborough, Mr. Perry. I see that Julia Needham-Watts is wanting to come in.
Yeah, just to put the context, really, that there's an awful lot of things to weigh up, and people use the park for different reasons. Some for exercise, quite vigorous exercise, and some people just as a place to be. And I think any decision that is made needs to bear in mind a couple of things. It's a national nature reserve, and we're not the only species that use it. So the impact that we have on the park is not only on ourselves, it's on the National Nature Reserve and site of special scientific interest. But any decisions that are taken there, we the Royal Parks, and we need to remind them of this, the burden mustn't fall unfairly on certain sectors of society who perhaps don't have any other way of getting to the park than by being driven there. And bearing in mind that what Alex has said about the burden falling on the roads around the outside of the park, the other thing, unfortunately, we're going to have to face up to is overall traffic reduction is what's needed, because if you take some traffic out of the park, it needs to go somewhere else. And eventually, we're none of us going to be able to get anywhere unless we tackle that. So I don't have the answers, but I have lots of questions about it. And I'm sure that that's reflected in the views of our residents as well. And we're keen to know what those views are. Indeed, they're already coming in.
Good.
We have, Gareth, just to say, we have made some strong representations in advance of them making their decision about the types of considerations they should make, not least some of the communities that will be impacted, like Ham. And so we hope that they'll reach a reasonable conclusion.
Thank you. Okay, I have a note here that Etiquette Candidator, I hope I got that right, would like to make a comment about the Twickenham Station development.
Hey, hi, thank you. Hey. I forgot the name of the person who raised the question about fire safety for Twickenham Station.
That was Lindsay Roberts.
Perfect. Thanks, Lindsay, so much for raising that question. I have a particularly vested interest in that particular question because I'm going to be one of the residents in the development. I have been given an assurance from Solum and Osborne, and my question is, who can I forward it to so that can be shared with Lindsay, that they haven't used any material related to Grenfell. So it could be of interest. And the follow-up to that is to perhaps Councillor Ben Kosher, who mentioned that there could be inspection. So is it something that Council would be doing to make sure that note that the statement I have made in regards to using safe material is really true, and is it part of inspection that Council would do? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, can I speak?
Yes, you can, yes.
So yeah, I think best thing perhaps is we could speak to building control and ask them to confirm and send the confirmation to the relevant residents who've asked for it today.
Excellent. Just so you know, as part of the information you'll be getting after this Zoomy thing we're doing, everybody will be given the contact details for all 6 of the ward councillors who are present on this call, and their emails will be included in there, so you'll be able to forward that straight on. Okay, thank you. Right, Helen Montgomery, well, I don't think so, but is that Mr. Montgomery Smith? If we can unmute Mr. Montgomery Smith, then we can hear his question. There we go.
Hello.
Off he goes.
Hello, my name is Mark Montgomery Smith. Yes. Helen is unable to be here. She's ill in hospital, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. It's not the time to discuss it.
No.
My question is, what does the council say to Richmond Yacht Club and Twickenham Yacht Rowing Club, who have invested in their venues being viable businesses for wedding parties over the last couple of years, and the Ilpie Boatyards who have always invested in their businesses and continue to do so, and rely on local parking for customers and tradespeople to access, as just to emphasise the weddings rely on some people, not everyone comes by train, people need to park. Could they consider a shared use of the existing embankment road, sharing it with markets, etc., with planned closures, potentially providing a win-win solution where everybody is happy and solving lots of the transport issues? That's my question.
Okay, well, one for the ward councillors, I think, for Twickenham Riverside for the moment. Councillor Chard.
So obviously the recent consultation on parking and servicing on the embankment between Water and Wharf Lane proposed the removal of the parking from that area. And I'm very strongly of the view that that is an area with a beautiful view, great utility, great public open space, and that area is not best used for parking at all, in terms of the viability of businesses in the area, in terms of the utility of residents, in terms of the enjoyment of one of the most beautiful parts of the Thames. So I'm very clear that I don't support parking in that area. We're very clear at the last election on that. But the consultation that's going on is specifically about providing alternatives, about providing alternative parking areas, additional spaces elsewhere in the controlled parking zone, and about providing sufficient servicing to enable those businesses to take deliveries and individuals and residents to take deliveries as well. So I'm going to disappoint you, I think, on my view on what should happen in terms of use of that space for parking. But I would like to reassure you that we're taking very seriously the need to provide alternatives within a reasonable distance, whether that's on street or in the various car parks in Twickenham town centre.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to come in? No? Okay, thank you for the answer on that, James. I'm sure it's a conversation which will continue for quite some time yet. Okay, thanks a lot for your question, Mrs. Montgomery-Smith. Okay, it's Will. You have the next question on the board. If I can remind everybody not to be sweary in the chat and refrain from making political comments. Technically, it's the council shilling in the meter, so we have to be impartial on all issues. So if it's Will, are you there?
Councillor Roberts, I am asking Will to unmute himself, but I think he might have stepped away from his computer.
Okay, that's fine. We will, if we get the opportunity, we'll come back to Will. Oh. I just lost everything there. We'll move to a question from JT then. JT, question in regards to homelessness in Twickenham.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hello.
Hi, thank you. Who may I contact in terms of expressing concern about the amount of antisocial behaviour in the evenings from inebriated rough sleepers on Twickenham High Street? I've unfortunately witnessed rough sleepers screaming at late nights of the hours and almost stumbling into the road, which is obviously extremely dangerous, and particularly on King Street. How do we sort of assist with housing for local homeless? Thank you.
Okay, so who fancies taking this one? Is that Roger there? Yep. Yes. Okay.
Yep. Thank you for that question. I did receive an email earlier today about the very issue, and I guess it may have come from yourself. Obviously, if there's antisocial behaviour which is disturbing you and potential to become violent, then it's a police matter. You should contact the police. Ward councillors are aware of some of the issues, both on King Street and down to the river, and I know Councillor Chard has been speaking to the police about it. Unfortunately, Spear, the local homeless charity, do try to intervene, but there are groups of homeless people who do not want to be rehoused, and that's a problem. And I know Spear continue to liaise with those individuals. I appreciate that's not a satisfactory answer, but I will respond to the email that you sent earlier. And the council have a homelessness strategy. We're very mindful that whilst the pandemic, individuals were rehoused, there is the potential for homelessness to increase in future months with the problems with jobs and mental health. But I'm happy to discuss separately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julia, were you waving it earlier or?
Well, I was going to say more or less what Roger has just said, so I don't actually have anything to add to that, other than that we're happy to hear from people who are worried in the usual channels, but I agree with what he's just said.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your question. Okay, Mr. Lloyd, you said you wanted to support Jalal about the distancing on the bridge. Would you like to expand on the comment? We're just waiting to unmute you. So Stephen Lloyd.
There
we go.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. No, I was just making a comment to support what he was saying, that that specific bridge is narrow. It's impossible for okay, I'm 6 foot, some of the people on here know me, I'm 6'3" and 18 stone. So I qualify as not small. And two of me cannot pass each other without brushing ourselves. And not long ago, I was up the stairs at the end of the bridge, and up comes a lady walking. I had to backtrack, otherwise I was going to brush against her. So the question is the council assuming that the public are behaving sensibly, which clearly in this case the public was not, or are you working on the worst case behaviour? Just to say, I used to work for the DHSS years ago after the last riots, and my patch was Brixton, Stockwell and Clapham. So my faith in human nature went out the window at that point. So I tend to assume the worst. Cyclists keep me on track because I tend to assume the worst with them as well. But I'm always happy when I get the best. So is the council policy based on assuming that the public will behave sensibly, or is it assuming that the public will be the public?
It's not. It's based on neither. Let me say, Gareth. I mean, if it was based on the worst case scenario, frankly, we would shut up whole tracts of the borough to access, and we'd literally grid it off, not sign it off. It can't be that, because ultimately, what we do as Liberals, I think, and I say that in the loose non-party political sense, is we recognise that very often the best, most sophisticated judgments that can be made reside with the individuals making them. And to just take that specific case, I mean, I run over that bridge almost every morning. if I choose to, or sometimes take another route. And I know that if I come into conflict with another person, that I am accepting that risk. And I also assume, perhaps incorrectly, but that the person who's coming over the other side of that bridge entertains that prospect too, and does so with a degree of willingness.
Surely, by that definition, if the person's halfway across the bridge and you come on, you are making that decision for them.
But they're also making that decision because
if they're halfway across an empty bridge.
Yeah, but they've gone to that bridge. They've gone up that bridge and they've gone knowing that it's narrow 9 out of 10 times.
But they've made a judgment assuming that the people at the far end, if they then appear, who were not there initially, would back off. Now,
well, at the end of the day, I think.
Sorry, are you liberal or conservative? Because you're actually blundering your way through this one. I'm sorry, but.
Well, allow me to finish the point before you tell me what I've said. The point I was going to finish with is, even if you do what has been proposed, which is to erect signage on every one of these ginnels or narrow pavements, because narrow pavements with car parking would fit the bill equally. Take a road like St Margaret's Grove or Southwestern Road. The pavements are probably, no, in fact, they're narrower than that bridge. So to put signage on all of these roads and all of these ginnels would be a disproportionate consumption of council resource, and critically, signage doesn't result in compliance. There will still be people that will go up and over all of those locations, producing precisely the same levels of conflict. And what you're saying really is that
sounds like yourself on that one as well.
Very, very quickly, inconsiderate pedestrians or cyclists or motorists will always be inconsiderate, however much signage you erect.
I agree on that. I think I'm very concerned about if somebody's already up there, they've made the decision. If somebody goes up there and it's empty, and then a second person comes on, that second person is making the decision for both people, not one.
But there are alternative routes, is my point. It is not as though this
and
is
there's the ability to wait as well.
But there are alternative routes too.
I seem to recall trying to add a bit of distance. This is part of my job here. Is that there was a bridge in, I think it was Hampton Wick, where some people had rigged up a sort of a makeshift traffic light system.
Yes, that's correct.
And I do recall it caused an enormous amount of confusion and no little distress amongst people who weren't quite sure about whether they were allowed to use the crossing or not. So maybe it is that we need to look at some form of interventions on some bridges along the lines that you suggest, but we have to remember that resources are not infinite, and that as you both agree, and I'm going to leave it on the point of agreement rather, is that you will get some people that will ignore a sign or an instruction, however well intentioned and however sensible it may be. So there you go. Thank you very much for that. Let me see. A few minutes left. I'm trying to see if there are new points. Mike, about Cavendish House residents. Are you there, Mike?
Councillor Roberts, this is Ellie again. Just to say, I'm trying to unmute Mike, but he's not accepting the unmute request, so he also might have stepped away from his computer.
Okay. So,
Councillor Roberts, should we go back to Will at all?
I'm afraid I'm sorry to say, Will, I've had complaints about Will's comments in the chat, and I'm afraid, sorry, Will, if you can, no. So Stephen Lloyd's off, going to support Brentford. Best of luck, sir. Mr. Perry, about your gyms.
The mosquito.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise. No, we're not going to go to Mr. Perry. I do apologise. This is what happens, Mrs. Dolan. I didn't purposely ignore you. People are doing loads of comments in the chat, which I have specifically said, please don't do comments in the chat because people get missed. This is an illustrative point. Please come across to Elizabeth Dolan.
Hello there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and I'm so sorry. I have been trying to moderate the chat as much as possible.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. I have to say that I'm in very strong agreement with quite a lot of the people that have pointed out that not everybody is going to be able to go on public transport going forward. Obviously, they're going to encourage cycling and public transport considering recent events. But my mother is 82 and has had 2 strokes and a heart attack, and she's not going to get on a bicycle anytime soon. So as much as I, admire people who like to keep fit, because I do very much, and understand that this has obviously been an important time to do that, and people are getting on their bikes, as it were. What are you going to do about the consideration for people who can't, and also children who can't, and also, as the other gentleman said earlier, people with mental illnesses who actually find going out full stop really difficult. I don't understand why the planning for Twickenham Riverside hasn't actually potentially considered a sort of double layer of having an area where you can have a market and cafes and housing above, and then actually a car park underneath. And particularly, has the actual consideration for potential flooding, considering climate change, actually been taken into account there? I'm also concerned about the parking at Kew Riverside, because obviously they are making allowances there now, and there are alternatives to parking along the road, mainly due to cycling. But I go on a regular basis, and I have to say that cycling lane is used mainly during sort of, I would say, commuting hours, and not really much at any other time. And I've even watched cyclists actually cycle on the outside of those barriers rather than actually within the barriers. So I do find this frustrating when I actually have to make use of these areas myself. I've also been in tourism, and Kew is actually losing money at a phenomenal rate at the moment. And if we don't want it to end up as either a parking lot or another development of housing, and losing a huge benefit to our society and world as a whole, particularly as I understand that, obviously the Councillor of Richmond Borough should be, in my opinion, from what I've seen, hugely supportive of things that support climate change and the environment. Why are they not trying to do that with this parking? Because you need schools to come to actually learn about the environment, to understand what's going on. Plus, you also need people who are scared of going out to actually go out, and they won't go out without a car.
Shall I address a couple of those? I'll leave the Riverside.
Let's get James in first, because James can answer about Twickenham
Riverside.
I'll
kick off with the Riverside aspects of it, and Alex will comment on Kew and some of the wider issues. I think your question on underneath parking was sort of a reference to underground parking, was it? Potentially.
Well, only in the sense that if you actually drive down at present, you drive down to the Riverside, and you could actually build over the top of the present parking area, creating not only, as you say, a very nice area that people can actually sit and look from and look to, particularly when out rowing, etc., whatever, but that would also allow access for people to come and go.
So you mean sort of raised area, and then sort of the existing car park would just essentially be underneath?
Where it
is. We did go out with a competition to architects who looked at the full range of options that could be explored for making that area pedestrian.
Yes, but I presume that
that was not one of the things that they came back with.
Sorry, we do need to allow the councillors the opportunity to reply. I will let you come back in on for rebuttal or challenge.
Okay, fair enough.
So that was not one of the proposals that they came back with. It strikes me as something that would be inordinately expensive and create rather a dark, dingy, sort of semi-underground bit by the Riverside, and it doesn't strike me as particularly attractive. In terms of underground parking, in terms of building underneath. Sorry, could I just complete? Thanks. In terms of building underneath, there were too many issues in terms of flooding. The Environment Agency have previously raised concerns about flooding in that area of digging down at the bottom end. In terms of the general sort of parking situation, the thing that's really important to stress is that although parking is being removed from the immediate Riverside area, the whole point of the recent consultation was looking at alternatives for many of those vehicles, particularly those that need to use it for servicing and for disabled people and so on. So it's not that parking issues are being ignored. The point is just being made that the best place for parking in Twickenham is probably not the most attractive part of Twickenham, that beautiful riverside area. That seems to be rather a waste of that particular space.
Okay, can I make a comment, please?
I've made is that when you're looking at measures to make it easier for people to travel actively, to go by bike and to walk, that isn't just for the benefit of the people going by bike and walking. If you get people out of their cars and onto a bicycle, it means those who really need to use their cars find the roads less congested and easier to get about on, and find it easier to find a parking space.
I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry, but I really don't think you're actually listening to anything I'm saying. I never commented on anyone digging down. I said that the area would obviously be where it goes down, and then to build over the existing area. That is not going to impact on it at all. I also don't understand where you rely entirely on somebody's suggestions from an architectural company, whereas I understand from a building perspective, yes, but why shouldn't you be putting forward the things that are necessary for the area and for the public, the general public who use it, and therefore they work off that list? Surely that is the sensible thing to do. We
did work on.
And then can I now finish, please?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, if you're going to be adding businesses and also properties, then who is going to go there? If people can't get there, they're not going to go there. The high street is half empty as it is. Why are you going to add further coffee shops and further shops that are going to be half empty as well, when actually you could benefit from things where businesses are already there, they need to benefit, you're not consulting them, you're not listening to them by the sounds of it. There's already I know from personal conversations that a business has already left Eel Pie Island because they don't conceive that they don't think it's going to be conceivable to actually continue being there because of all the changes you're making. So I'm sorry, but I just don't think you're listening.
Okay.
Okay.
Shall I follow up on the wider points?
Okay.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind.
Unless Councillor Chard wants to respond further, I'm happy either way.
I mean, just on the point, I am listening to your idea of having a built-over embankment area with parking.
Yes, but every time you say something,
parking underneath it. I just don't agree with it. I don't think it's a good idea.
This is what this forum is for the wider public to put forward through ideas. And then you keep saying, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be nice. I think this, and that makes everybody think that this is a dictatorial, situation, and that we're not getting anything through to you at all about what we actually, what our actual feelings and thoughts
I don't think that's fair. There are various points that have been raised today that people have said, look, good idea, let's explore them further. On that one, I'm going to be honest with you and say that I don't think it is a good idea and we shouldn't explore it further.
Okay, so I see that Councillor
Is that because you've already signed the contract with the architects, so you can't?
Gareth, could I come in on that just briefly? That Twickenham Riverside was a major issue in the last local election, and we were aware of its sensitivity in the local community, and that's why, with the leaders' support, it was decided that we would go and do this properly by setting out a very detailed brief about all the things that local people over the previous years had expressed a desire to have on that site. And it's not going to please everybody, but a very substantial brief, a very detailed brief was drawn up. And this was done in an open way, such that when the brief was agreed, architects had a brief to follow and that they needed to follow. So that while there's room for disagreement, and I would agree with Councillor Chard that we are listening and we realise that not everyone agrees with the plan, there was a process that was followed, and it's a process I think that we're quite proud of in terms of doing it openly and transparently. That's all I want to say.
it might be a nice process, but the point being is, what is the outcome? If the outcome is not going to be successful, then why would you want to put your name to it in the first place? What I'm saying is, surely if you've already signed a contract for something that you apparently think is, you know, the wider public's definite absolute preference, then, you know, if there are things that are put forward from during that process, before even any building has, you know, been started, then why wouldn't you have some leeway within that? I mean, for instance, when you were talking about
I'm happy to take this offline with you if you want to email me about it. But in terms of the contractual position, this isn't about the contract with the architects. We've not agreed to sort of tie our hands in terms of what we get from them. They are there to design what we ask them to design. And as Julia said, we put together a very detailed brief, and we did that in consultation with local groups and involving their input, and after very extensive public debate.
Gareth,
about a contract.
Okay, we're going to bring Alex in for the last word on the Kew Road.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. So Councillor Charles already said one of the key things, which is absolutely by incentivising cycling and walking for those that can, you do create the space, or you reduce the pressure on the road network, parking and so on for those that can't. It's also true that from the increased congestion and air quality issues, it's the very people that you mentioned, the elderly, the ill, and the very young, who are most at risk from the air quality impacts of increased car usage. And so we have to safeguard people against that. In relation to Kew Road specifically, well, Kew Gardens have their own car park. They charge £7 a day for parking in it. They've also opened up, with our support, the staff car park that they have at the Herbarium for parking at weekends as well. The truth of the matter is that you've got a free-for-all parking provision that was parking over what was a designated cycle lane. And in a time of COVID, in a time of coming out of COVID, where we have to do all we can to support cycling and walking, it just was not sustainable to keep.
What about all the schools
allow me to finish.
From around the rest of the UK?
Allow me to,
they can't walk.
Ms. Dolan, you must allow people to finish the points.
It is also outside, as you yourself, I think, referred to it in some terms, a global beacon of sustainability. And to have basically a free Richmond parking lot outside a global beacon of sustainability makes absolutely no sense. In terms of usage, the present arrangements there are not the proper arrangements. They are immediate arrangements that were put there to safeguard parking violations that would break up the cycle lane. So those water barriers are not the long-term endeavour, and they do have drawbacks, those water barriers. We're actually going to be installing at the beginning of August what are called wands and orcas, which is the properly engineered segregation system of that cycle lane, both under water barriers and under the newly engineered scenario. The width of the carriageway available to non-cyclists is widened. It's become a wider space, not a narrow space. There is more space for other road users. And ultimately, the cycle lane, in terms of usage, it should not be judged on the temporary arrangements that are in place and the people that are using it at present. Clearly, as I said, there are drawbacks to the fact that it's not permeable at the very least. But the other thing is, I watch frequently the usage of that lane too. And what is important, as well as overall levels of usage, is types of usage. And I have seen some incredible examples of cyclists along there that I wouldn't have seen before. People with very young children on children's seats in front of bicycles and so on, who would have never dreamt of cycling along the Kew Road otherwise. And so, to be perfectly honest, I believe that it has proven its worth already, and it will only get stronger as time goes on.
Fine, may I respond to that then, please, just very quickly?
Very quickly.
Okay, my point was not actually about the barriers and about the quality of the barriers or the quality of a so-called cycling lane, or however it is actually brought about. My problem is the fact that you gave Kew, I think maybe a week or 2 weeks notice on this. They had very little lead time for planning about what they were actually going to do in the interim. And then, you know, all the people who came visiting also didn't know, because obviously everything had changed post-COVID. The fact that there is a car park, yes, fine, but are you going to pay £7 every time my mum wants to go?
I have.
Tries to go at least twice a week. When my mother wants to go, are you going to do that? Because that's all she gets to do now.
Miss Dolan,
I'm sorry, Alex.
Could I encourage you to remember the code of conduct? I mean, it's fine to be passionate, but there is a fine line between passionate and
yes, I am passionate because I live in the borough. I use the borough regularly, but you're not allowing me to do so without paying through the nose unless I'm a cyclist. Apparently they are above everybody else on this argument, and that's exactly what you're dumbing me down. Every time I try and talk within the arguments that Alex is putting forward, I'm told to shut up. So I'm sorry, but I'm getting quite annoyed by the fact that that's exactly how I feel as a member of the borough. And also the fact that you're saying, oh, well, we need to make people aware of this place and it's so amazing we shouldn't have a car park outside. Well, I'm sorry, but what about the thousands and thousands of children who need to come from around the rest of the country in coaches from their schools who don't get an opportunity to do that because they don't have queue on their doorstep?
We've made alternative coach provision, which we're consulting on and engaging Kew Gardens over.
Right, well, I look forward to seeing how that pans out, because I, as a member of Kew, as well as a member of this borough, I will be asking them avidly about how much take up they get on that, particularly as people are nervous alone to come out. And all you seem to be doing is preventing that presently.
It's basically nil at the moment because of the restrictions.
Okay, so there we go. Always, Mr. Perry, I'm afraid we must wrap it up there for the evening. I know you want to talk about gyms and what have you, but we do need to finish up. So it's always good to go out on a bit of a Barney. It sets everybody up for the evening, and makes that glass of Sauvignon Blanc look all the more attractive. So thank you very much to the community engagement and communications team. It's been splendid work in keeping all of this being sent together and creating the videos and what have you. Don't forget, you will be sent a link to all of the information which has been raised this evening, and of course the link to all of the ward councillors. So should you wish, I'm sure that they will be delighted to continue having these conversations with you beyond the scope of this. So I'm now just have to say thank you to Councillor Jeff Acton, Councillor James Chard, Councillor Julian Eden-Watts, Councillor Roger Crouch, Councillor Alex Eamon, and of course Councillor Ben Koza. They have all been tried valiantly to answer all of your questions, but of course, as always, it is you who make these events, so the final vote of thanks goes to yourselves. Thank you.